The curse is lifted and the beast is dead! But at what cost? What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken, for the first time in franchise history, finally defeat the Vancouver Canucks. And they don't just beat them in some sort of close 2-3 or 3-4 game where both teams have their chances and the Kraken let the Canucks back into the game in the third period like they've been doing up until this point. No, this one was an absolute stomping from start to finish, a 6-1 victory, a very convincing victory for the Kraken. A 6-1 win to get them 61 points on the season, and with 28 wins, just 47 games in, that's more wins and points than they had all of last year. And also, thanks to points percentage, once again makes them first in the Pacific. Of course, it does have to be said that I don't think there was a Kraken fan out there coming into this game that was feeling confident about how it was going to go for Seattle, even with there being pretty much every reason to think that it should. Even outside of how much better the Kraken have been as a team so far this season, the Canucks were coming into this game as a total tire fire as an organization, with having just fired a coach that everyone outside the front office liked, and then bringing in a new guy who they'd pretty much already hired a month ago, but were letting this other guy hang out to dry until they could find a spot where there's a couple of bad teams that they were playing. And on top of all of that, they're coming in on the second half of a back-to-back, while the Kraken have had 3 days rest. So yeah, with pretty much everything pointing in Seattle's favor, in fact, so much pointing in Seattle's favor, it almost seemed inevitable based on how things had gone that they'd find a way to screw it up again. But fortunately, even still, missing Schultz and Schwartz, Burakovsky and Gord game time decisions did play in this one. It didn't take long at all for at least some of that tension to be relieved, as the Kraken were all over the Canucks right from the get-go. And while they did miss on a couple of scoring opportunities, there really wasn't anything going the other way, and eventually, one of these great scoring opportunities for the Kraken does find the back of the net, as Larson fires off a shot from the corner that rebounds off of Martin right out to the slot for a wide open Bjorkstrand, and as Gord falls over next to the net, Bjorkstrand gets a shot off as he falls over himself, which finds the back of the net and gives the Kraken the early 1-0 lead. For Bjorkstrand, it's his 8th of the season as he continues to slowly heat up here into the back half of the season after a pretty snake-bitten first half. And as far as assists on the goal, it's both of that top pair defense, with both Dunn and Larson getting apples as they continue to remain hot at both ends of the ice. It is then a good start for the Kraken, but they've also had this before against the Canucks and still managed to screw it up, so there's no time to let off the gas, and they aren't interested in doing that anytime soon, as they quickly end up with a power play, and right away on that power play win the ensuing faceoff, get a shot off on goal. It's McCann who ends up taking the shot, and this is a play that they tried throughout this game, and I don't know if it was a new plan that they had to try to breathe some new life into this power play that had started to stagnate a bit once teams figured out that they were just trying to get the puck to either Tolvanen or Sprong for one-timers, but it's right down the middle as McCann puts it to Eberle. Eberle tips it towards the net, and waiting next to the net is Wemberg to tip it in as it just tic-tac-toes in its way into the back of the net to give the Kraken, just 7 seconds into the power play goal and the 2-0 lead. Of course, it may also have helped a middling Kraken power play that they were facing the only team with the worst kill percentage than them at this point in the season, but you face who you face, and especially when they're doing as poorly as the Canucks are on the penalty kill, you have to take advantage of it, which the Kraken do here. It is then at this point that the Canucks take their timeout, which I'm pretty sure is the first timeout of Tocchet's career in Vancouver. I mean, they've only played the one game against a terrible Chicago team who they handled, so I don't think he took one in that one. I don't know, I didn't watch it. It's, two bad teams playing against each other, which I guess is relevant if you're Connor Bedard, but other than that, the Kraken do maintain momentum out of this timeout, but end up giving the Canucks their first power play of the game, which is a pretty good power play, even if nothing else is really going right for the Canucks, against what is still the 31st ranked penalty kill in the league. Fortunately, though, while this Kraken penalty kill doesn't last the full 2 minutes, that's only because it's a 2-on-1 break for the Kraken shorthanded that leads to a tripping call on JT Miller, where, You'd like to see JT Miller on the back check more often if you're a Canucks fan, but probably not like that. Either way, it finishes off the power play and the kill for the Kraken. And the Kraken do pretty much just kill off that 4-on-4 time that follows this, and they get a power play, which they get a couple more shots on, but with just about a minute of power play, they aren't able to score again. They are at least able to regain that momentum and maintain it through the end of the first period, where they carry in that 2-0 lead into a second, which gets off to a bit of a back and forth start, but the Kraken find their legs once again, and once again are right back in the offensive end, laying on shot after shot on Martin in net for the Canucks. Sadly, though, it is this constant offensive zone pressure from the Kraken here early on in a second period after having dominated the first that eventually leads to that one very unfortunate part of this game for the Kraken that hopefully doesn't get even worse when we find out more about it later. It comes on what was probably born out of frustration, but honestly it doesn't matter, as there is absolutely no excuse for this, as Tyler Myers lays a completely dirty scumbag hit on an unsuspecting Matty Beniers, who's just standing in the middle of the offensive end looking the other way. The puck isn't anywhere near him. Myers just comes up behind him, pushes him, straight up hits him, checks him in the back. Beniers falls over backwards, smashes his face against the ice as his head bounces off of it, and he's slow to get up and even slower to get to the bench, which is pretty weird to see from him. He's taken some big hits here over the course of this season and even in the few games last year that he played, but he's always quick to bounce up and get right back in the play or get to the bench or whatever. This one, he was noticeably shaken up. Even when he was on the bench with his head in his lap, he does end up staying in the game throughout the rest of this second and actually almost scores a goal later on in one of the 3 shifts he had after this play. But he doesn't end up coming out in the third period, and while we haven't heard anything yet, all that Hackstall said after the game was that he wasn't available to go in the third. This is completely speculation, but my guess would be that we'll probably see him going into concussion protocol, and it could mean that he's out for these next 2 games before the All-Star break. And even more than that, hopefully it doesn't end up costing him a trip to the All-Star game in his rookie season. And what irritates me even more about this hit is that it wasn't just one hit in an isolated event out of nowhere. Really leading up to this hit throughout the entire first period and the second period up until it, really not so much afterwards, the Canucks were going after Beniers the entire time. Even Myers before this had another point where he pushed Beniers to the ice next to the Vancouver net in the first. It was pretty clear coming into the game that the Canucks had one goal, and that was that Beniers wasn't going to beat them. Now, unfortunately for them, the Kraken, unlike some of the other teams in the NHL doing as well as the Kraken are, aren't based off of the success of 1 or 2 players. They've got depth scoring, which really made the Canucks pay for just going after the one player. But also to target him like they did, and then to have that all culminate with this dirty hit. As for Myers, again, there's absolutely no excuse for this, and probably the only reason that he only gets a 2-minute minor for interference is because Beniers did stay on the bench and in the game at least through the rest of this period. That having been said, I would not be surprised at all, especially because it is Matty Beniers, one of the up-and-coming darlings of the NHL and one of the big rookies, potentially rookie of the year. I would not be surprised at all. In fact, I would probably be surprised if Myers doesn't end up getting a suspension for this hit. Of course, that having been said, I have already been surprised this season at least once by the complete lack of any sort of regulations or consistency from the Department of Player Safety, or even any interest in really doing their jobs, which we saw with those back-to-back games with the Alexiak suspension, which was probably fair, and then the non-suspension on the hit that cost Schultz a few games in concussion protocol himself. That one actually drawing a major end game misconduct in the moment, which this one only drew the minor. And again, if they do end up suspending Myers here, probably the only reason for it is that Beniers is, at this point, a higher status player, more publicly visible player, I guess you could say, than Schultz is. Which is still a stupid way to do anything, but that's where we are. At least for the Kraken's part, once this call is made, Myers goes to the box, the Kraken go to the power play. Once again, they quickly make the Canucks pay for it. This time it does take a full 30 seconds as the Canucks are able to clear the puck out of the zone. But in transition back the other way, Wember gets it up to McCann. McCann with a nice chip pass past a couple of killers for the Canucks all the way to the other side to Burakovsky. Burakovsky skates up to the faceoff dot and then gets the pass back over to McCann, who has a wide open net that he buries it into the back of for his 23rd of the season, still leading the Kraken there. And a second power play goal for Seattle in 3 tries and a 3-0 lead. Then off the ensuing faceoff, whether it was the Canucks trying to get something going on their bench where really nothing had been going their way to this point in the game, or it was the Kraken trying to have some sort of response for what just happened to their star young rookie in a completely dirty, unforgivable hit, Oleksiak and Schenn drop gloves and go at it. And while Schenn does get a couple of good hits on Oleksiak and actually gets his helmet off early on in the fight, Oleksiak definitely gets the better of this one towards the end and ends up taking Schenn to the ice as they both head to the box. Now, unpopular opinion or not, as those of you who have been around this channel for a while well know, I'm not crazy about fights in hockey in any context, but as long as they are a part of the game, this is the context where it needs to happen. There has to be some kind of response after your star rookie player who's still just 20 years old takes that kind of a dirty hit from a larger player that ends up eventually knocking him out of the game and clearly got him slow to the bench and a guy that really doesn't react to hits in that kind of way before. So then that response has to either be a fight, which usually would be against Myers, which is part of why there's some confusion as to why this fight started in the first place, with it being Schenn on the Canucks side of things rather than Myers. But either way, there has to be some sort of fight to make it clear that that's not all right. Or you go after Myers later in the game, which I think Tanev might have tried to do, although that was kind of spurred on more by Garland. Either way, this is the way they decided to deal with it. But of course, at the end of the day, no matter how much rock'em sock'em robots you want to do at center ice, the only way to truly hurt a team for hurting your team is to hurt them on the scoreboard. And that's what the Kraken continue to do, not just after getting that power play goal on the penalty after the Beniers hit, but also with another goal shortly after this fight. This time, it's Gord getting a pass out to Tolvanen in the high slot, and Tolvanen, with that rocket of a one-timer, finds the back of the net far side to make it 4-0 Kraken, and the route is on. Of course, that having been said, if anyone from the Department of Player Safety happens to be watching this and feels like actually doing your job for once, especially if the NHL is serious about preventing or limiting head injuries, then maybe you could hurt Myers specifically by going after his checkbook and handing the suspension that he deserves. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see about that. Getting back to the Tolvanen goal though, with the goal, it's his 8th of the season and now 6th with the Kraken. And with the assist, his 2nd of the game, it's a secondary assist with Gord getting the primary. Vince Dunn now with 2 points in this game, hits 36 points on the season, a new career high for him. And it's still late January, so yeah, he's going to blow out his previous totals by far. And even after having taken the 4-0 lead here, still not even halfway through the game, which pretty much should be job done for the Kraken, they continue to maintain the momentum and get offensive pressure at the other end of the ice until late in the second, where eventually Vancouver is able to turn it back the other way. But even then, on one of their chances in response, the Kraken once again find the back of the net, and once again, it's Larson getting it to Bjorkstrand, though this time it's just a direct pass across the offensive end. Rather than going off the goaltender, he goes straight to Bjorkstrand, and Bjorkstrand, with a quick handle, goes straight to the back of the net to give the Kraken the 5-0 lead and getting his 2nd of the game, his first multi-goal game as a Seattle Kraken. So now with a 5-0 lead and totally dominating the Canucks even outside of that, honestly, it could have been even worse than 5-0 at this point if Martin hadn't made a couple of pretty nice saves between the goals he let in. It's pretty safe to say, even if we didn't already know the final score, that the Kraken are going to get this first win against the Canucks. So all that's really left to do is try to get Jones that shutout. Ah, crap. Yup, with just a few seconds left in the second period, and I mean literally just a few seconds, the Canucks do end up finding the back of the net as a puck gets out from behind the net, off of one player next to it, and then off of Garland out in front. It's shot on net by Lazar, who somehow puts it off of Garland again and into the back of the net to break up the shutout. It's 5-1, which would be the score through the next 6 seconds into the second intermission. Even still though, and yes, even with the Kraken having already blown a couple of leads in third periods to the Canucks, most recently having blown a 2-goal lead in a third period to end up losing that last game that these two teams played against each other, the Kraken should still be able to hold a 4-goal lead in the third. And I honestly think that that last goal at the end of this period for the Canucks just served to prove to the Kraken that they needed to come back out and make a statement here early on in the third, which they're able to do as they get momentum early. And once again in the offensive end, I don't know if it's a puck that bounces off a defenseman or just a weird bounce that ends up going the Kraken way from a McCann pass, but it ends up on the stick of Donato next to the net. And Donato, from his backhand, looks like he's going to go around the net, but he catches Martin sleeping, fires it backhand, and roofs it into the top of the net to get his 12th of the season, continuing to be hot goal scoring for the Kraken, and making it the 6-1 score that we would end up having in the end. Of course, even with that having been said, and even with now a 5-goal lead here in the third, the Kraken did kind of make it interesting throughout the rest of this. I mean, not really all that interesting, but they do allow the Canucks to get 4 power plays throughout the rest of this third period, 3 of which come in the final 7 minutes. Actually, it's under 7 minutes. The Kraken kill off one here not long after this Donato goal, which I think they ended up getting another shorthanded chance on. They had a few shorthanded chances in this game and just couldn't get one to go, as it's been a while now since they got a shorthanded goal. Then in the final minutes, first, with actually just under 7 minutes left in the game, it's Eberle to the box on a double minor for high sticking, which the Kraken are able to kill that off, allowing, I think, just 2 shots on goal in those 4 minutes of power play and getting one more shorthanded chance themselves. And then right as Eberle comes out of the box, Cale Fleury heads to the box with another high sticking call, this time just a 2-minute minor, but there's just over 2 minutes left in the game, so that's pretty much going to be the rest of the game. And while the Kraken also get another shorthanded chance here, they almost let in a goal as Horvat misses a wide open net. Late in the power play, the Canucks straight up had Jones and the Kraken penalty kill for that matter completely beat as Horvat was on the far side. The pass gets across and he's got the full cage to shoot at and ends up putting it behind Jones and through clear to the other side, well wide of the net, missing again what was completely empty shot. And that would be the last chance the Canucks would get, as the Kraken do end up finishing off the 6-1 victory. Outside of that whole situation with the Myers hit on Beniers, which one more time I will say, which we'll already probably know by the time this video is out, there isn't at least a 1-game suspension or fine for Myers from this hit, then there's absolutely no point in the Department of Player Safety. The NHL might as well just dissolve it and admit that they have no interest in protecting their players or hits to the head whatsoever. Aside from that though, this was an absolutely dominant 60-minute complete win for the Kraken, that pretty much the only thing they did wrong was go to the box 5 times. Something that they were able to get away with and kind of pad those penalty kill stats, especially towards the end of the game, with 3 kills in the final 7 minutes of the game. But other than that, this was a complete domination of a team that, let's be honest, the Kraken probably should have been having games like this against at least the other 2 times this season, if not sooner. Okay, probably not sooner. Last year's team wasn't really dominating anybody, but to lose to the Canucks 4 times, come on, you gotta at least get one of those. In the end, the Kraken do end up out shooting the Canucks 35-20, and it was not even that close, as I'm pretty sure Seattle didn't even have a shot on goal, or maybe they had 1 shot on goal in the back half of the third. So they had 34 shots by halfway or even less than halfway through that third period, at which point the Canucks, I'm pretty sure, had like 14 shots, so well under half and closer to a third the number of shots that the Kraken had. So really the only way the Canucks even make it look as close as it was, which still isn't that close, is because of all those power plays at the end. I mean, it was such a complete win for the Kraken that they even somewhat significantly won the face-off battle, something that they've only barely won a handful of times this season. That's even with Horvat winning 11 of the 24 face-offs the Canucks win to 31 for the Kraken. And just real quick, since he did come up and also missed that empty net goal there at the end of the game, Horvat is one of the Canucks that I think is much more likely than not to be on his way out of Vancouver by the trade deadline, and the Kraken have been rumored to maybe be in on trying to get him. Obviously, he's a very good center. I mean, he's the captain of their team for a reason, and on top of that, he's very good in particular at winning faceoffs consistently, which the Kraken could use some help in that department. That having been said, and the rumor mill looks like it's going this way as well, I just don't think it makes sense for the Kraken at this point to go for Horvat. While he is still a fantastic player at a premium position and could help in a place that the Kraken need it with the faceoffs, they also just have so much depth already at the center position that even though Horvat would be a slight improvement over at least a couple of those guys, I mean, we like Geekie and Wenberg, but let's be honest, Horvat's probably better than both of them, especially the way he's been playing this season in what could be a career year for him. With the amount that the Kraken would have to give up in order to get Horvat, it just wouldn't make any kind of sense, especially if they weren't able to get him signed and he was just a rental until leaving in the offseason via free agency with his contract being up. So honestly, at this point, especially at center, where again, the Kraken have been very deep and even have had trouble getting all their centers into the lineup. I mean, sure, Donato isn't a true center, but he and Geekie have had to exchange that fourth line center role here a couple of times where both of them have shown that they can score in that role. It just doesn't make sense for the Kraken to give up draft capital or prospects, which are a part of that future that they're still building towards being even better than what they have been this year in years to come, in order to try to get a rental to make a bit of a run this year where, even with things going as well as they are, there's other teams that are still ahead of them as far as talent is concerned. And again, with apparently it being a complete fire sale in Vancouver, if anyone's wondering about any other Canuck players, while the Kraken could use a defenseman like Hughes for sure, honestly, I'd kind of rather see him go to the Devils to get all the Hughes brothers together. It would be kind of fun to see three brothers play on the same team. And for JT Miller, I mean, he's pretty much the exact opposite of a Ron Francis type of forward. But getting back to this game specifically, and this absolute smashing of the Canucks, which again just feels nice to say, we do still have 3 Kraken stars to hand out in this game. And again, this was such a dominant win for the Kraken in all aspects that it's hard to really pick 3 guys. You could really have your pick of any 3. I mean, even by advanced stats, according to Hockey Stat Cards, powered by Dom Lecision's models, the top 6 players in the NHL tonight, not just this game, but the entire league. Granted, there were 5 games, but that means there were 10 teams that played. The top 6 players were all Kraken players. But since I do have to limit it to just 3, I mean, it's my rules, I guess I could do whatever I want, but I will limit it to just 3 to keep it a nice clean 3 stars. The first star has to be Oliver Bjorkstrand, the first multi-goal game of his Kraken career, so yeah, he'll get the first one. And even outside of that, he had a couple of other very good chances to score, one before his first goal and a couple of others as the game went on. And that whole line with him, Gord, and Tolvanen was fantastic all night long. So yeah, first star for Bjorkstrand. And then second star, again, the second and third star, this is where it does really get difficult. But with the second star, I've gone back and forth with this, even as this video's gone along, thinking about it in the back of my head. I do feel like I kind of have to go with Vince Dunn as he sets that career high in single season points with 36, getting 2 assists on the night. So I'll go Vince Dunn with the second star. And then the third star, I mean, I don't know who to pick. You could have Adam Larsson had 2 primary assists. Yanni Gord had 2 assists. Jones stops all but 1 shot on goal, and that one was hardly his fault. In the end, as much as I would love to give it to Gord, and honestly, I had Gord as the third star right up until this point, and I really, really want to give it to Larsson as well. Him and Dunn, again, probably deserve to both have stars in this game, but I think McCann is deserving of it here. He has the goal that responds to that hit on Beniers, as well as getting 2 assists, one of them a primary assist. So yeah, I'll go McCann, but I can definitely see an argument, like I said, for any number of those other guys. Let me know down in the comments who your 3 stars would be. I feel like Bjorkstrand's definitely up there for most people, but then those second 2 really could go any number of different ways. That having been said, I think we will kind of bring it to an end on this one. Let me know again what you thought about this game as a whole. Obviously, feel free to vent and go after Tyler Myers as public enemy number 1. I mean, keep it somewhat civil. It's a mistake, and he probably knows that. Even if it was a pretty egregious, violent, and scumbag mistake that he does make, which hopefully gets him suspended for a couple of games. But again, I guess we'll just have to wait and see about that. Point being, don't let the anger over that ruin what was otherwise a fantastic night for the Kraken and a big monkey off of their backs in the form of getting their first win against the Canucks. And in that vein, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video or the game that it was about, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. Until next time, where we'll hopefully see Beniers again, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless and go Kraken.